Hey y'all, it's your Missniecytv and I'm here to do a review for Sistas Season 9, Episode 1. The episode picks up where it left off and all we see is a gunshot and it goes back to present day. We see that Andy and Zach are still trying to deal with the Hudson situation, and apparently what happened was Hudson and Zach were fighting over the gun. Gary came in to help, and Gary was the actual one who shot Hudson. And we find all this out because the police come to question Zach and Andy. The police are basically like, what was the motive for all this? And Andy's like, it's because I had dealings with Gary and his revenge plot. Hudson feels as if Gary had something to do with the murder of Kimberly Potter, which is the... Mind you, as they're talking, Jasmine's body is getting carried out and Hudson's being sent off to jail, and Zach is like, I was all wrong with Hudson. So basically, Shorty just did this because she wanted her lick back. Gary and Andy are sitting there shaking up, and Andy's like, I've never been this close to losing my life before. Andy's like, if it wasn't for you, Zach, I really could have lost my life, and I thank you so much. Zach is like, oh, it's nothing, I got it. Oh, the police told them that they had to go down to the station and make a statement, and Zach is like, I'm not doing that. I'm going home and talking to my wife. And we see Karen and Fatima stuck in traffic, and Karen's going through labor, and Fatima's trying to keep her calm. And Karen's like, there's something wrong, I need help. Fatima's like, I'll try to get you to the hospital as fast as I can. But they're stuck in like monsoon of traffic. Fatima turns on the radio and she realizes that the whole land is experiencing a citywide blackout, and it's causing people's phones not to have service and traffic to be backed up. Fatima finally gets Karen to the hospital, and we see Fatima helping Karen. See her helping Karen get to the emergency room, and as soon as she gets to the emergency room, she's like, help, she's in labor, she needs help. The nurse at the station is like, there's nothing we can do for her, all the rooms are filled. Grab a wheelchair or something. The nurse is just extremely rude. Fatima's like, she's in labor, there's something that needs to be done, and the nurse is like, there's nothing I can do. All the rooms are filled. Just sit her down and we'll get to her as soon as possible. Karen's like, I need to see my doctor. The nurse is like, well, your doctor's not available. The nurse is like, your doctor's not available, but we could send you the next doctor, Dr. Cruz. Karen's like, okay, but how long will it be till he gets here? The whole time Fatima's talking to the nurse, right? Karen's over there yelling, something's wrong, I need help. Fatima comes over and she feels Karen's hand and she's like, she's burning up. So Fatima tells the nurse what's going on, and the nurse is like, that's all just a part of labor. Fatima's like, no, it's not. There's something really wrong with her. The nurse is like, well, I'll get her on the fetal monitor in a second. Fatima's like, until then, can you get her some ice chips or something? The nurse is like, yeah. Karen's like, Fatima, call my mama. Fatima's like, okay, and I'll call Aaron and Zach too. Fatima gets up to leave, and Karen's like, no, Fatima, don't leave me. Fatima's like, I won't leave you. Over at the juice bar, Sabrina just caught Rich getting down to business with Penelope. Sabrina storms out, and Richard follows behind her, and she's like, so this is what you do after we just broke up 48 hours ago? Rich is like, I only did that because I couldn't stop thinking about you and I needed a distraction. Sabrina's like, so you decided just to sleep with her out of all people? Rich is like, I didn't even put the tip in for her. Sabrina's still stuck on the fact that they just broke up 48 hours ago, and Rich is like, I know I shouldn't be saying this right now, but you're the one that told me to be single. Like, I didn't know that there was some unwritten rule that I was supposed to follow after we break up. Sabrina's like, well, normal people with hearts normally wait a certain amount of time, but I see you didn't. Rich is like, can we just go somewhere and talk? Sabrina's like, talk about what? Rich is like, I'm actually glad that you came in and stopped it. We're at Danny's. We see Danny talking to Tony, and she tells him that it's a citywide blackout, and she's lucky that they have generators at her place. Tony's like, I thought you just didn't pay your bill. And Danny's like, I'm an adult and I pay my bills, thank you very much. Then Tony starts talking about his whole situation with him having to move to Alaska. Danny's like, you've never seen a black person move to Alaska. If anything, they're trying to tell us to stay away from it. You know they have 6 months of darkness over there. Tony's like, I'm not trying to hear those Alaska facts right now. He's like, we could try to work some out though. We could try to do long distance. And Danny's like, well, sorry to break it to you, but I'm taking long distance off the table, because I don't do long distance. Tony's like, well, so you're willing to break up with me over me going to Alaska? And he's like, yeah, because I don't do long distance. Tony's like, well, we could work some out. It'd only be a year, and if we stay committed to each other, it could actually work. Danny's like, so you're a long distance expert now? Tony's like, yeah, I actually am. Danny's like, how? And then she thought about it. She's like, because your ex-wife. Tony was like, well, she was in the military, so we had to make it work. Danny's like, you see how that turned out for you? Danny's like, well, we got divorced for a totally different reason. Danny's like, well, you're not giving yourself a lot of credit because you're very smart. You were the VP and you have a lot of good credentials. You can find something else that's better. Tony's like, yeah, I know that, but not really in this kind of economy. Tony's like, well, you just got that lump sum of a settlement, so we can live off that for a minute. Danny's like, no, you can't. That's my rainy day money. Tony's like, I was just playing with you. I just wanted to see how you would react. Danny's like, yeah, now you know. Danny's like, maybe if we get down to business, it'll clear your mind a little bit and you can make a better decision. Tony's like, okay. Over at Andy's penthouse, her and Zach are there and they're having a conversation. And she's like, thank you for tonight. You really had my back. Zach is like, it's okay. That's what friends are for and I got you. Zach is like, you gonna be alright though? Cause at this stage you were a little shaken up. Andy's like, I'm a little shaken up though. I've never been that close to that type of experience. Zach is like, not too much longer to be a thing of the past. Andy's like, yeah. Would you mind looking around though? Zach is like, can you tell me what I'm looking around for? Zach is like, Gary, you seen the way he was at the precinct? He's not worried about you. Andy's like, yeah, I know that. But I'm still kind of scared and there's something wrong. So he goes to check. And Zach is like, I don't see nothing. Zach sits back down and she's like, Zach, do you think I should get a gun? Zach is like, don't let my girl influence you. And he's like, well, she might be right. I just want to be prepared for anything. Zach is like, well, you have nothing to worry about. Jasmine's dead, Hudson's in jail, and Gary probably won't bother you anymore from the way that he was acting at the precinct. He thought he was a big man that could do big man stuff, but he realized that he wasn't. And he's like, I'm wondering if this will change him for the better. Zach is like, if it does, that's still not your problem anymore. And he's like, Zach, another question. Zach is like, what is it? She's like, have you ever been close to death before? Zach just looks at her like, really? Andy's like, so how did it make you feel? Zach is like, in the past, I didn't care. But tonight I was actually scared because I have a lot to live for. Andy's like, yeah, that's true, but it was very close tonight. Zach is like, yeah, but that just means that God is not through with us. Andy's like, yeah, but I'm still shaken up. Zach is like, there's nothing that a little therapy and prayer won't fix. Andy's like, you pray? Zach is like, yeah, once or twice a year. It's like, that's not the point. God knows my heart. And the point is, you're going to get through this. Then Andy's like, yeah, but I know Fatima's worried about us. Zach is like, yeah, I got to charge my phone. Andy's like, I thought you charged your phone at the precinct. Zach is like, I tried to, but the officer didn't have it plugged in all the way. And he's like, well, you could try to plug it up in my bedroom. Zach is like, back over at the juice bar, Sabrina and Rich are still having this conversation. And Sabrina's like, so you're glad that I stopped it with you and Penelope? Rich is like, yeah, I should never took it that far with her. Sabrina's like, y'all grew up together, right? Rich is like, yeah, I was always close with her brother, but I'm not cool with her like that. Sabrina's like, so were you always attracted to her? Rich is like, no, she was just honestly something to do. And that's when Penelope walks out and she smacks him in the back of the head. And she's like, so I was just something to... So Penelope's like, so I was just something to do. Rich keeps telling Penelope to go back inside. And she's like, I'm not going back inside. And Sabrina's like, you do need to go back inside. And Penelope's like, it was just sex, Sabrina. It was nothing serious. Penelope's like, why do I even care? We're not even friends. Sabrina's like, I would never be friends with somebody like you. Penelope says the woman who effed her sperm donor. Sabrina looks at Rich and she's like, have you been pillow talking? Rich is like, Penelope, go back inside. Penelope is like, I'm not going back inside. And Rich, you're a grown man, you can make your own decisions. Sabrina's like, you know what, you're absolutely right. And apparently he made the wrong. Then Penelope starts being messy and starts touching on Rich. And Sabrina's like, are you for real? Penelope's like, yeah, apparently you can't handle him, so I would. Sabrina basically tells him that they both reek of desperation and they belong with each other. Back over at the hospital, Fatima's trying to calm Karen down. She goes to talk to the nurse again, and she's like, what happened to the fetal monitor? The nurse is being rude again, and then Fatima's like, y'all trying my patient. The nurse is like, well, maybe you should wait it out. And then Fatima's like, well, she's having chills and she's burning up. The nurse is like, well, pregnancy makes the body experience different things. But Tima's like, she's saying something's wrong and I believe her. The nurse is like, well, she's not gonna die. Fatima's like, what would make you say that? The nurse is like, that's exactly what you're thinking. Fatima tries to call Zach, but of course Zach doesn't answer because his phone's not working. Speaking to Zach, over at Andy's penthouse, Zach's trying to get his phone out of Andy's room. He keeps calling her name. She doesn't answer, so he just walks in the room and he sees her naked and he comes out the room and he's like, Andy comes out the room too and she's like, don't tell Fatima anything. Zach is like, tell her what? He's like, I'm gonna head out, but I'm gonna call Fatima first. So he tries to call Fatima. He doesn't have any reception. So Andy's like, I don't have any reception either. Back over at the hospital, Fatima's still trying to calm Karen down. Karen's still saying that something's wrong with her. Then this black nurse comes up and she's like, are you Karen, Ma? Fatima's like, yeah, that's her. Then she tries to check her out. The The nurse says, I'm gonna get her into a room. It's Rhonda goes to tell the nurse at the desk, right, that she's going to get her into a room. The nurse at the desk is trying to fight her about it, but Rhonda's very adamant that she's going to get her into a room. Karen has finally been placed in the room, and that's when Miss Lisa shows up, and she's like, Karen, I know you're in a lot of pain, but this is the process of labor. Karen's like, no, Mama, something's wrong. Miss Lisa's like, has she always been saying that? Miss Lisa's like, has anybody else been saying that? Fatima's like, well, she's been saying that for a while, and there's nobody in here to check on her. There's supposed to be a Dr. Cruz coming, but I don't know where he's at. Miss Lisa's like, where's Dr. Cruz? And then that's when Dr. Karen's like, Fatima, did you call the girls? Fatima's like, yeah, but nobody's answering their phone, and I left them all voicemail, and I called Zach too. Miss Lisa's like, I called Aaron, and Aaron's on his way, and that's when Dr. Cruz comes in. He's like, how's the pain on a scale of 1 to 10? Karen's like, 100. He's like, I see some blood, but that's pretty normal. Miss Lisa's like, shouldn't you get an ultrasound to see what's going on? The doctor's basically like, she's alright, she'll be okay. Dr. Cruz is like, it seems like we've obtained your records from your OBGYN. It seems like you're having twins by 2 different fathers. Where are they? Are they on their way? Miss Lisa's like, so what does that have to do with my daughter's care? He's like, I just want to know the next of kin is just in case she knocks out. Miss Lisa's like, well, you could talk to me. The doctor's like, well, she's going to have to wait a little bit more time before she can get to the door when he walks out. Back over at Andy's, Zach tells her if Fatima calls more than once, something's really wrong. Andy's like, well, I can listen to the voicemail she sent. The first voicemail is basically like, call me when you get this, call me when you get this. The second voicemail basically says the same thing, and Zach is like, y'all sure y'all just friends? It seems like a little more. Andy's like, nah, that's just my girl. Andy decides to listen to the third voicemail, and it seems like all the girls decided to listen to it at the same time. The voicemail basically says that Karen's in labor, that there's something wrong and they need to get to the hospital immediately. Andy and Zach rush out the house. Danni rushes out the house and she tells Tony what's going on. Sabrina finally starts her car after she has a breakdown in the car about Rich. Then we see Aaron has finally made it to the hospital, and he's carrying balloons and he's all excited. And Miss Lisa and Fatima are outside of Karen's room, and Aaron walks up with balloons. They can tell that something's wrong. They don't tell him nothing. So he looks inside the room. He sees blood on Karen's bed and he knows that something's wrong. I'm just going to say this. Karen needs to see the hospital for everything they have. Something's going to happen to her babies and it's going to be the hospital. And I think that the baby that is going to happen to is Zach's baby, and I hope that Karen nor blame her for this because it's not her fault. Let me know what you guys think about the episode. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, turn on your bell notifications. Bye!